Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, Kiender.co.uk. Kiender stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to Kiender and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
Talk about the game that was popular among many and yet I'd barely even heard of it. Yeah, Evenfall. This was a game that literally, when I was talking about my anticipated games for Essen, people were going like, oh, finally a top 10 that doesn't have Evenfall on it. And it's like, what's Evenfall? And I just completely missed this one. I think I must have like glossed past it when I was looking through like the tabletop together tool, maybe heard the title, maybe saw the cover, maybe something about it must have made me go, ah, whatever, and just sort of skipped by it. But finally I decided, you know what? While I was at Essen, I grabbed a demo of it, had a chat with the designer, very nice chap, you know, even switched the English and German decks around so that I could get into a demo when loads of people were camping it in the morning. Check out my vlog where I talk a bit about that in more detail. But yeah, I basically got to sit down, have a demo with 3 other players, and now I grabbed a copy and decided that I would do this one for review. This isn't a review copy, this is literally me going, okay, I want to buy this and see what it ticks, and see if it handles well with lower player counts, how well the solo mode works, etc. And I'm seeing a lot of people give a lot of praise to this one, but of course when I see a lot of people giving praise, the curmudgeon in me thinks something must be up. Well, question is there, or is it actually justified? Evenfall is essentially an engine builder card game. You play as witches and elders and mages and druids, whatever. The theme doesn't really make a difference here. But what you're essentially doing over 3 rounds is that you are utilizing this deck full of multi-use cards in order to score the most victory points by playing different locations out, but by also putting ritual cards on those locations to trigger like special abilities or bonuses, but also playing specialists to get special abilities as the game goes on, but then also council members in order to get game end abilities or round end scoring. There's a lot of different things that you can do with these cards, but it's one of those types of games where basically each round you do as many things as you can from the available actions until everybody passes. So you've got to micromanage your resources like leaves and potions, etc. You've got to utilize an element of worker placement with your witches and your slightly more restricted elders, and basically it's a case of be as efficient as possible. Get as much as you can done with the resources and cards you have, and try not to pass too early so that you're basically wasting your time. But the cards that you've got to play come in various multi-use guises. So for example, specialists can be played either as a special ability that goes throughout the game, or it can be slid underneath your board in order to be could be a special ability, it could be a round end scoring, it could be a game end scoring. You know, they've got 2 different uses. But then also you have the rituals, essentially, the rituals of power or whatever, which you place on these locations of power. They call everything power in this game. Everything's got a power thing. But these places of power you can harvest to get some more resources if they're on the top of your board, i.e. your outer circle, which is essentially the top here. But then these rituals, where did that ritual go? There we go. These rituals can be placed on these locations, so like so. They'll score the victory points if you can get them into your outer circle, which is the bottom part of your board, but they might have more action spaces for you to use your various witches and elders on in order to trigger more bonuses. Once you get to the end of the round, there is a battle phase which takes place on these 2 or 3 locations depending on player count, and basically these have got action spaces for witches, but there's also, these are the ways that you actually get to these places of power. And at the end of the round, you essentially do a scythe bidding phase where you secretly bid how much mana you're going to spend from what you've collected, add it to the witches that you've already got at the location, and everybody gets prizes based on how much power they contributed, but the winner gets a power stone, which effectively can double the point value of something in their inner circle. So you rinse and repeat these 3 rounds, and at the end of the game, have a guess.
Of course!
Card-based engine builder games are not something that is somewhat uncommon in the world of board gaming. A lot of people were trying to say, oh, this was a bit like Race for the Galaxy, but honestly, no, it's not really. Race for the Galaxy has the simultaneous phase thing where you're selecting what phases are going to happen, and then you play the cards, there's only so many actions you can do and stuff, and it's like, nah, this game isn't Race for the Galaxy. I wouldn't compare it to that. I'd instead compare it to something like Empires of the North, because Empires of the North is another one of those, or even Imperial Settlers, you know, that whole family of games where you play cards in front of you, they have special abilities, you have limited resources, and you try to do as much as you can until you're forced to pass and end the round. This is essentially the same sort of deal. But I also want to compare it to a game I've still got on my shelf and I've not played in ages called Elysium. This is a little hidden gem from a while ago that nobody really talks about anymore, but in Elysium you had cards that you collected and they went above your board for certain reasons, but then you wanted to try and get them below your board for scoring. Well, this kind of works in a similar fashion because a location that's at the top of your board allows you to harvest it for resources, but then if you can get it to the bottom end of your board, the outer to the inner circle, it will then score points and you're able to use your elders for worker placement on those actions rather than witches that normally have to go to the other locations where you battle. So there's an element of Elysium, an element of the Imperial Settlers universe. Combine the two and you effectively get Evenfall.
I don't get it.
Production-wise, the game is fine. I mean, it's not the cheapest game in the world, but it does give you some half-decent quality components. I mean, you've got wooden resources, you've got some cool screen-printed chunky wooden meeples. I mean, these are pretty cool, you know, the elders and the witches having their hats on and stuff. No actual faces. I mean, you don't really see any faces, you just sort of see the clothing bit, which is quite a nice touch. You've got your player boards, which you have to use the, what's it called, double-sided sticky tape in order to stick down, but no big deal. I mean, they function nicely and they're pretty sturdy. Mainly, really, you're getting the artwork for the price point, though. The artwork in this is really, really nice. I mean, look at that. The cover, I must admit, I glossed past it when I went past in Tabletop Together. I'm surprised I did because that cover is beautiful. I really like the look of that cover. You know, everything else, like the rulebook here, these various boards, even all the cards. The cards have got some really wonderful artwork on it. And if you don't know the artist, Martin Mottet, I believe you will find that that name also features in Revive. Revive is a game where his artwork is barely on show because no matter how good the art is in Revive, there's not a lot of it and the game kind of looks bland when it's on the table. Come on, fanboys, admit it. But here, the artwork is on show. It's on all the cards, it's on all the locations, it's on your player boards, the rulebook. You know, this artwork is there to be seen. I mean, I especially love it on these battlegrounds, you know, the central mountains there. You've got this kind of yellow autumn. I really like that look. You know, it's a really cool look for this game. It fits the theme that it's going for. And, like I say, not the cheapest game in the round, but nothing in here feels tacky. The multi-use card game is something I enjoy in board games, and here, it's no exception. I like it here as well, although it's only in some respects. The artifacts and rituals that you put down on the cards are kind of one note. They give you an action space or some cool ability, so they're not exactly really multi-use. The multi-use aspect comes from the specialist cards, of which there's two uses for each. You either have the special ability as a specialist or you put it underneath your board as a council member. But what I do like is, A, there's a lot of them, so there's a good amount of variety. The abilities are pretty varied. But another aspect I like is that you can't have more than one of them in your coven. You can't duplicate. But the bottom abilities for the council members are different between the two copies. So yes, the ongoing ability is the same, but the bottom bit is different. So there's quite a lot of variety in some of the end-game and round end and sort of ability things you get from council members, which means that in this game there is quite a lot of different strategies that can formulate based on the cards you get. Now, it is difficult to formulate a strategy from the get-go because you get your initial set of cards and there's only so much you do in the first round. The first round is quite quick. Round 2 and 3 is where the real meat lies and where a lot more stuff is happening. But your first round is mainly kind of setting up what you're good at to begin with, and there's only so many things that you can kind of decide at that point. But, you know, it is good that there are a lot of different varieties of ways to play. I have tried multiple different paths. I've gone battle focused, I've gone ritual focused, I've gone harvest focused, I've gone coven track focused, you know, I've done, orb, other thing focused, there's a lot of different ways that you can play, and it's good to have that for an engine builder.
The problem is choice.
Even the player boards have got asymmetric powers. You can play your first game with just basic symmetrical sides, but then you have got 4 different player boards with asymmetrical sides on them, and you can each one has a very different style of play. I haven't yet noticed any to be completely unbalanced yet, although I've heard reports that maybe the blue star is a little bit powerful at times. But honestly, I just find these quite entertaining to play, and honestly, if you're playing with gamers, you could probably just switch to using this, like, you know, asymmetrical side off the get-go, and it will do a decent job. So combine that with the rest of the cards that you've got for strategies and that, even though the deck of cards is only so big, I mean, that's not a bad size for the deck of cards, and you only see so many of them in the game. I mean, you draw typically 6 every round, and you might draw a few more. You're not seeing a lot of the deck yourself during the game, so yeah, decent amount of variety all around. The game itself is actually not that complicated either. The rules are not particularly huge. I mean, there's not a lot of rules in this book. There is a lot of pictorial examples there, so it looks like a lot of pages, but there's a lot of examples. It's written clearly. I didn't have a problem understanding anything in this book. It's pretty well written and well done, and the game overview and icons on the back of the book is really the only reference aid you need, but on top of that, you do have a little reference aid each that tells you every single action, including important costs you need to know, free action that you can do, and then it gives you the most important, like, iconography on here. This is about as good a reference aid as you need, and thankfully somebody actually knows how to do a half decent reference aid. But yeah, if you're a gamer, you'll pick up this pretty quickly. Don't recommend it for casuals though, and light gamers I think are going to struggle a bit more, but a mid-weight gamer, a heavy gamer for sure, is going to pick this up without too much trouble. The fear I have with lighter gamers is that they'll look at all the options of the cards and what they can do and maybe just get a little bit overwhelmed. But I expected this to be quite fiddly, a little bit clunky, and honestly, I couldn't really think of anything in this game that was fiddly or clunky. Everything just kind of made sense. The game also comes with a solo mode, and the designer was adamant that it couldn't be a beat your own score AI. Well, it's not. It's actually an automata. It's an AI opponent, and essentially what you do is you do everything you normally do in a multiplayer game for 99% the most part, but essentially the deck of cards acts as the AI. So you flip a card off the top of the deck, and its victory point value is how much you move around this track, and this track dictates whether it plays a card to its area, you know, it has its own player board and such, whether it gets VP, whether it levels up its own coven track, you know, it does its own thing as the automata, and to keep it simple, most of the stuff it does just gets it victory points. But it does mean that you do actually have an AI opponent, and a pretty tough one at that. Yeah, 4 levels of difficulty, and you should be able to beat this on the easiest difficulty, although it's still going to be, you know, a bit of a challenge. On the second hardest difficulty, on the second easiest difficulty, this thing will give you a run for your money or kick your butt. You know, it's pretty difficult. I can't imagine why anybody would want to play on the 2 hardest difficulties, because they just seem like the difficulty would just run away with itself and completely cream you. And also, some of that is down to a bit of luck, because there's a lot of times when you'll play a card off the top of the deck, and the VP values on here range from somewhere like 1 to 4 with a lot of the cards, and so, you know, you flip a card off the top of the deck and it gives it a specialist. Well, is that specialist worth 1 VP or 4 VP? It's entirely luck based, because the AI doesn't use resources. So the AI solo mode works, and I do enjoy myself playing it because I get to do what I enjoy from the normal game without too much of a speed or time issue, but you have to accept that the game is slightly random in how well the AI does. It's not so much based on what you do, other than the fact that it will keep going until you pass. It just can be a case that the AI just sometimes gets a little bit luckier than you do.
Wait! My cheating unit malfunctioned!
Interaction is pretty bare bones in this game. Now, on the plus side, the interaction is all positive. So basically, if anything happens, it typically gives opponents something good. So I'm going to copy your ritual. That's okay, you get a victory point for it. I'm going to get a bunch of victory points off this. Yeah, but everybody else gets a book. Okay, I'm going to do this. You get something else. There's no kind of I punch you in the face type card in this. So that's a good thing. But still, the interaction is barely there, because other than that, and just going up against an opponent for these battles, there really isn't that much interaction in here, which kind of makes the whole idea of playing this with more players a little bit mute. You know, playing this solo, great. Playing this 2-player, fine. You know, I played it 2-player the other night, in fact, and it worked quite well. But I just can't really see much reason you would play this with 3, and especially not 4. 4, it drags on way too long. The AP potential in this game is quite high with the different effects and the fact that you draw a bunch of new cards at the start of the round, which means you don't get time to kind of prepare what it is you're going to do with those cards. And playing this with 4 players is quite a drag. Yeah, to the point where I don't think I want to bring this out with 4 unless I really, really trust the people I'm playing with. It's not a game that I think is designed for multiplayer. 1 or 2 players is your sweet spot here. 3 if you must. 4 if you're desperate. But you're probably thinking, but you got those battles. Surely they're interactive. Not really, because the battles are a little bit on the meh side. All the battles are is simply you compare how many witches you've got on these spaces, and then you secretly do the bid with mana, like in Scythe with the combat values, and then depending on how much you bid in there, you all get value, you all get stuff. You get resources, you level up tracks or victory points. But everybody gets a prize. So you're not actually doing much against the opponents, apart from the fact that the overall winner gets one of those power stones to double the VP on one of their rituals, which are good, but not essential. I mean, you can get points by other things in this game. If you're not going battle focused, then fine, who cares whether you get a power stone or not? It's no good having a power stone if you've got a bunch of 1 victory point rituals in your area, because 1 to 2 whoopee-doo, it's not worth it. It's really only worth getting the power stones if you've got something like a 3 or 4 victory point ritual. You want to double that. That's a lot better. But that's all it is. You know, you basically get 1 extra thing compared to other people. If I want to bid 8 power, I can do so. If you only want to bid 4, then go ahead. If I only want to bid 6, great. If you want to bid 8, then go right ahead. I can't actually stop you. These don't really feel like battles per se, but even then, this whole like aspect of the end of the round, it's quick. It doesn't take very long, but it just feels a little bit meh. For the most part, it's just the fact that I'm spending mana to convert them into goods. So having this whole secret thing, and to be honest, I mean, most of the time, like 90% of the time, I can predict exactly what the opponents are going to bid on this thing. So it's not like the secret bidding thing is overly necessary either. It just, I don't know, this feels like it needed a little bit more to it. It's streamlined and it's smooth, but it also feels just a tiny bit unnecessary. I don't think you really, really needed it.
Well, I like war, but I wouldn't say I love it.
Evenfall is overall a pretty solid engine builder game. I mean, we've seen these card games before, but the fact that it utilizes an element out of Elysium, which is a long since forgotten game by most, and combines it with the likeness of something like the Imperial Settlers universe to create something a bit more unique, shall we say, in this field, is a pretty impressive feat. I like the way it looks. The theme is tacked on like crazy, but the artwork is decent and certainly makes it pop on the table to an extent. Particularly with the specialists, I think they look really, really good. But the variety in the strategies that you can do with just essentially 1 deck of cards and a few locations is pretty impressive. The variety in the game, having 4 asymmetrical abilities and an AI mode that does work. I mean, the AI mode is not amazing. I think the difficulty curve is a little bit high, especially with the randomness that the AI can get points. But I much rather have this than beat your own score, and the fact that the designer actually put in the effort to make one is, impressive in itself. If anything's letting us down, though, it's the fact that, 1 phase of the round is pretty mute and not that interesting, which thankfully is not the real meat of this game, but it's still just something that you can kind of like, meh, whatever. Not saying you ignore it, but it just doesn't feel that satisfying when it's there. But also the player count scaling is a little bit of an issue. I wish that this maybe had a little bit more interaction that was not just simply, oh, you get a point if I do this. I wish there was actually reasons I wanted to care what the opponents do, because for the most part you don't. You race to maybe grab a location before someone else can, but and maybe a worker spot. And there's not that many worker spots, and even then it's not likely you're going to lose, get knocked out. So really the only thing that you're doing with the opponents from a competitive side is trying to see if you can win one of those power stones on the battle phase. And that's kind of it. Really, there just doesn't seem a reason to play this with 3 or 4 players, which restricts this down to a solo and 2-player only game. And I don't get 2-player games to the table often, which means I'm practically only playing this solo, and that hurts for me. Not to say that, I don't want to play it solo. I think playing it solo is pretty fun. I mean, it's Is it as good as Empires of the North for that purpose, though? Empires of the North has got more variety with all the different factions, and it's certainly maybe a little bit even more streamlined. But, you know, Empires of the North is still a really, really great game. It's probably not quite as high rating as it was, you know, back in the day, but, you know, which one of the two do I prefer? I'd probably still say I prefer Empires of the North slightly, but, I probably do prefer Empires of the North, but Evenfall is still pretty solid. I'm giving it overall, if Empires of the North is going to be a 9 at this stage for me, I think Evenfall deserves a pretty respectable 8 out of 10. It's a great game, not quite distinction level, but I do enjoy a lot of stuff in this with the cards, with what you're doing in the game and the amount of variety. I just wish that maybe this phase was done a bit more interesting, and I do wish that maybe the AI wasn't quite so dependent on a little bit of a luck element for how well it does. And of course, the fact that I don't really want to bring this out with 3 or 4 players, and especially don't want to bring this out with 4 players, does limit my ability to get this game out. If you are constantly going to play this 2-player, then this is going to be a surefire hit for you. But for someone like me who needs more of a multiplayer experience a lot of the time, with the occasional solo mode thing, this still remains a great game, just not quite an excellent one. But honestly, still praise to it. I enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people are going to as well. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on that website. Let's get the thumbs in and get it into the hot reviews section. Then we get to check out more reviews that I have done. I've got Essen reviews coming out of my ears for this month. You know, I've already done several, and there's more to come besides. Obviously, let me know your comments. Do you like Evenfall? Do you hate it? What would you compare it to in terms of engine builders? Do you remember Elysium? Did you enjoy it? Let me know your thoughts. I'll be glad enough to read them. So take care, and remember, regardless of what your witch is getting up to at night, it's still only a game. So bye for now, everyone.